Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and boa tarde. I'm Jason Marzak, and I lead the Adrian Arch Latin America Center here at the Atlantic Council, and it is a pleasure to welcome everyone for this unique and incredibly timely event on a topic that is a growing important for all of us here. And I think not just because corruption is a way to make a hot summer day really seem even steamier. First, a special welcome to all the ambassadors who are in the room, friends of the Atlantic Council, friends of the Inter-American Dialogue, and a special thank you to the Inter-American Dialogue for their partnership on this event and in working with us to advance this important conversation on anti-corruption. I would also like to thank Jota, a leading Brazilian news service specializing in coverage of the justice system and politics. Your support and partnership have made this event possible, so thank you very much. We look forward to working with you moving forward. And of course, Prosecutor General Jano, Acting Assistant Attorney General Blanco, it's a pleasure to welcome both of you and all the other panelists, Mauricio Vesho, Patrick Stokes, Fernando Mayo, and Alana Rizzo. Thank you very much for being with us. Now, Brazil, as all of you know, is no stranger to the fight against corruption. Over the past decade, we have seen the justice system significantly strengthen, the results of which we continue to see every day. Brazil has indicted sitting and former presidents, senators, congressmen, and some of the most powerful business people in the country, many of which have now been convicted. And Rodrigo Jano has been a critical force in Brazil's anti-corruption drive. Regardless of one's political opinions, these are remarkable feats that show, in fact, a message that I like to transmit, the strength of the Brazilian judiciary, a system for many that has become the envy of many, not only around the hemisphere, but around the world. I think actually, I oftentimes say that you can probably count on two hands the number of countries around the world that would be able to launch and move forward with corruption investigations that touch those at the highest levels of political or business power, and Brazil is doing that. Prosecutors, judges, law enforcement, and attorneys are all critical in Brazil's ongoing fight and the lessons it has to share. As we all know, corruption is increasingly a transnational crime, which makes it even more imperative to build global cooperation and share what works to fight against it. At this moment in Brazil's transition, this is a pivotal moment to assess the Brazilian experience, Brazil-U.S. cooperation, and the waves to improve efforts fighting corruption all across the world. These lessons are especially critical for the many countries in our hemisphere and globally that are looking anew at how to stamp out one of the biggest impediments to social and economic progress. This anti-corruption drive is something we see as imperative to continuing to advance. Now, before we start the conversation, a note, this conversation today is all on the record, and also we are live tweeting the event, so if you want to get out your phones, but only to tweet, please use the hashtag ACBrazil. Also, for all those who might be needing simultaneous translation, this event today will be in both English and in Portuguese. So if you haven't yet gotten your translation, raise your hand, and there might still be a few translation pieces available. Actually, I don't see any hands. I see one back there. So just keep your hand raised, and someone will come over to you, ma'am, with that translation equipment. I'd like to kick off our conversation today by welcoming Acting U.S. Assistant Attorney General Kenneth Blanco, who is at the helm of the Criminal Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. Throughout his tenure with the Criminal Division, he has overseen several sections, including the Money Laundering and Asset Recovery section, the Narcotic and Dangerous Drug section, and the Organized Crime and Gang section. He has supervised many of the Criminal Division's most significant national and international investigations into illicit finance, money laundering, sanctions violations, including investigations of global financial institutions and money service businesses. Much of his work is in the international banking and financial services area, working and collaborating with partners in Mexico, Colombia, Panama, and I think we were just talking about before this event, probably pretty much every country, not only in the hemisphere, but broader than the hemisphere across the world. With over 2 decades of experience leading the fight against crime and corruption in the United States, it is a true pleasure to welcome the Acting Assistant Attorney General to hear his expertise and insight as part of today's discussion. After he speaks, I will then come back up and introduce Prosecutor General Rodrigo Janot, who will give remarks before sitting down with our esteemed Deputy Director and Brazil expert, Andrea Murta, and after that, we will have a second panel. So now, everyone, please join me in welcome to the stage Acting Assistant Attorney General Kenneth Blanco.
Good afternoon. Jason, thank you so much for that very kind introduction and for inviting me today to participate in this dialogue with my friend Rodrigo Janot. It's a pleasure to be here today. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Rodrigo, for the wonderful visit to my office on Monday and the great conversation that we had. And not only that, the great work that both of our teams are doing together. I think that's very important. Today, I have the privilege and the honor of speaking with you as the Acting Assistant Attorney General for the United States Department of Justice Criminal Division. Today, the topic, of course, is lessons from Brazil, corruption, crisis, global cooperation. But first, before I get into some of that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Criminal Division, which I mentioned to you just moments ago I have the privilege and honor of leading. Doing so, I think, will provide you with a better understanding of how and why we work so closely together with our foreign counterparts like Brazil. The Criminal Division is made up of roughly 700 attorneys spread across 17 sections and offices, mostly in Washington, D.C., but some stationed in offices around the country, and many stationed in offices around the world and overseas, including Brazil. Among other things, the Criminal Division's investigations and prosecutions often focus on complex white-collar crime cases, including, for example, bribery, public corruption, kleptocracy, organized crime, trade secret theft, money laundering, securities fraud, government fraud, healthcare fraud, and computer and internet fraud. Also housed within the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice is the Office of International Affairs, which is the United States' central authority through which all foreign legal assistance is centralized by treaty and designation. As everybody knows, economies now are global. They continue to become increasingly global and more global every day. So in that sense as well, do the criminal enterprises. They are global, and they don't respect borders at all. We need to find a way to be able to work together, respecting each other's sovereignties, but knowing that we need to become more efficient. This is a significant focus in the Criminal Division's white-collar criminal enforcement efforts, and in particular, its Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and its kleptocracy efforts. Whether uncovering a multinational bribery scheme or seeking to recover illegally derived assets associated with investment funds owned by a foreign government, or protecting the security of our financial system, our biggest investigations are increasingly transnational, often involving multiple foreign jurisdictions. As transnational crime continues to grow, and it's growing, the scope and complexity of those cases are growing as well. We increasingly find ourselves looking across the globe to collect evidence and identify witnesses necessary to build our cases, requiring greater and closer collaboration with our foreign counterparts. As a result, we find ourselves relying more and more on the use of various mechanisms of international cooperation with our foreign counterparts that permit for evidence exchange, fugitive apprehension, and asset recovery. In that vein, it is hard to imagine a better cooperative relationship in recent history than the one that we have between the United States Department of Justice and Brazil. We have cooperated and substantially assisted in one another in a number of public matters that have now been resolved, and are continuing to do so on a number of other ongoing investigations. Anti-corruption prosecutors everywhere are driven by similar principles. Bribery of public officials is wrong. It has a devastating effect on all of our national securities, on civilized societies, on intentional violations of anti-corruption laws must be treated as serious crimes, and those who violate that law must be punished, and their illegally obtained assets must be taken from them. As we have seen across the globe, time and time and time again, corruption inhibits fair and free competition to the detriment of innocent citizens and honest businesses that do not pay bribes. The U.S. Department of Justice remains committed to enforcing the FCPA and to prosecuting fraud and corruption more generally. To succeed in this commitment, we will always seek, when appropriate, to further our investigations through cooperation with countries like Brazil, a country that shares our commitment to rooting out corruption at all levels. The cooperation between the Department of Justice and Brazil has led to extraordinary results. In just the last year alone, for example, the Criminal Division's Fraud Section and the Brazilian Lava Jato Task Force have cooperated and coordinated resolutions in 4 FCPA cases: Embraer, Rolls-Royce, Braskem, and Odebrecht. Odebrecht, in particular, noteworthy due to its breadth and scope. Odebrecht, one of the world's largest construction companies, paid an unparalleled amount of bribes to high-level officials in a dozen countries to secure billion-dollar worth of projects around the globe. Commensurate with the conduct, Brazil and the United States, together with Switzerland, were able to achieve the largest ever global fine ever imposed in a corruption case. The company pleaded guilty in the United States and is required to cooperate with the respective countries' ongoing investigation of individuals, as well as to retain the independent compliance monitor for a period of 3 years. In Brazil, it's important to note, approximately 80 people have been charged in connection with this case. It's important to mention how those penalties were levied in these coordinated resolutions. By working together with Brazil and the department, not only assisted one another in gathering evidence and building the case, but made sure to credit the fines and penalties paid to each country, rather than imposing duplicative fines and penalties on the companies. This ensures fairness to the companies and provides the right incentive for companies to cooperate fully with the relevant jurisdictions impacted by this case. In our prosecution of Rolls-Royce, the UK-based company paid about $170 million in U.S. penalties as part of an $80 million global resolution to the investigations in 3 countries: the United States, the UK, and Brazil. As with Odebrecht, the Rolls-Royce resolution involved multiple countries, reflected the misconduct, which involved payments of over $35 million in bribes to officials in half a dozen countries. At the core of the tremendous cooperation between our 2 countries is the strong relationship built on trust. This trust, or some of us call it confianza, allows prosecutors and agents to have direct communications regarding pieces of evidence. Given the close relationship between the Department of Justice and the Brazilian prosecutors, we don't need to rely solely on formal processes such as mutual legal assistance treaties, which often take significant time and resources to draft, translate, formally transmit, and respond to. At the beginning of an investigation, a prosecutor or an agent from a country's financial intelligence unit can call his or her foreign counterpart and ask for financial information that, for example, may identify bank accounts. Once the investigation has progressed to the point where prosecutors are ready to proceed to trial, the evidence may be requested through the mutual legal assistance channel so that it can be admitted into evidence during a trial. This prosecutor-to-prosecutor or law enforcement-to-law enforcement cooperation has allowed both countries to more effectively pursue their cases. Let's face it, as I mentioned earlier, the criminals we seek to identify and bring to justice move quickly, and it's imperative that we do the same. Our respective enforcement agencies continue to cooperate fully with one another and help achieve astonishing results. Brazilian prosecutors and law enforcement have been at the forefront of the anti-corruption fight in the past few years and have exemplified what a prosecutor and law enforcement agent should be. Indeed, this past week, the prosecutors in Brazil won a guilty verdict against former President Lula da Silva, who was charged with receiving bribes from the engineering firm OAS in return for helping in winning contracts with the state oil company Petrobras. It's a case that this part put Brazil at the forefront of countries that are working to fight corruption, both at home and abroad. While the United States and Brazil are working together to investigate and bring criminal cases, particularly those involving corruption, the United States also stands ready to assist with the seizure of illegally obtained assets, even where a criminal case may not be brought in the United States. This is an important fighting tool against corruption, as well as all other crimes of organized crime. The Criminal Division's Money Laundering Asset Recovery Section's Kleptocracy Asset Recovery Initiative is specifically designed to target and recover the proceeds of foreign official corruption that have been laundered into or through the United States. It has proven to be an incredible tool, valuable fight against corruption. The results of this initiative have been outstanding. In 2016, the department filed the largest single action ever brought under the Kleptocracy Initiative, involving multiple bond offerings through 1MDB, raised money to benefit the people of Malaysia, but was allegedly stolen by corrupt officials and their associates. Just this year, additional complaints were filed in that case, bringing the total amount that we have worked to recover to well over $1.7 billion. I want to stress that these kleptocracy cases, that one of our goals, and the main goal, is to return the assets to those harmed by the criminal conduct. Just last year, for example, the department returned $1.5 million to Taiwan that constituted the proceeds of the sale of a forfeited Manhattan condominium and a Virginia residence that the United States alleged were purchased with bribe money paid to the family of Taiwanese former President Chen Shui-bian. These are but a few examples of how the department continues to work with our international partners. As I think we can agree, corruption is an evil need that needs to be rooted out. It undermines the rule of law, threatens the national security of countries, puts honest companies at a competitive disadvantage, and breaks down the social structures of our civilized societies. As I conclude my remarks for today, I want to say just a few things. It is no coincidence at all, that Rodrigo and I are here together today, or that he's in town this week. It is not strange that my good friend Raul Cervantes, the Attorney General of Mexico, was at the Department of Justice yesterday, or that the Ecuadorians were in meetings with our fraud section this week or last week in D.C., or that the Panamanians were here a few weeks ago, sent by my good friend, Procuradora Kenya Porcel, or that we were in Bogota 3 weeks ago, meeting with the Colombian Attorney General. We are all talking about corruption, illicit finance, white-collar crime. We're not just talking, but we're acting. Something big is happening in the world. You can feel it. It's happening every day. You can feel the momentum. The public, everyday people, are tired of having their money stolen by corrupt individuals in the public and private sector. They are tired of not having roads built to move their goods and to get to places that they need to be. They are tired of not having schools. They are tired of not having hospitals or medical care, or to have the infrastructure to secure themselves in their homes or their neighborhoods, because corrupt individuals have stolen their money out of greed and power for themselves. Money that was meant to improve society and the lives of everyday people and the most vulnerable of those people. Because all of this, people feel like they can't advance. They have had enough. People are demanding action. They are no longer silent. we at the Department of Justice will continue, like we have for a long time, pushing forward against corruption where it is, and we welcome our fellow counterparts in the world who are fighting this important fight against corruption. We are committed to working with our partners like Brazil, shoulder to shoulder, steadfast, to see what may come. Together, we will ensure that there is no place for corrupt individuals to hide, and no place for them to hide their money, assets, or any kind of wealth. No refuge or rest for the wicked. This is the plan. This is the strategy. This is our goal. I hope all of you here today will join us in this noble endeavor. Thank you.
Hard to follow that up. Thank you, Kenneth, for that passionate remarks and that excellent overview of U.S. anti-corruption cooperation. And congratulations again to you and the team at DOJ on all the work that you do every day. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce and welcome Brazil's Prosecutor General, Rodrigo Janot. He has been the Prosecutor General of Brazil since 2013, and in this role, he leads major investigations on corruption and crime, many of which all of you in this room today are quite familiar with. He began his career as Deputy Chief Prosecutor at the Brazilian Federal District Prosecutor's Office, and since then, he has occupied basically every major position in the country's justice system. He was a regional prosecutor, a senior federal prosecutor, a professor of law, and as Prosecutor General, he was the president of the Ibero-American Association of Prosecutors from 2013 to 2014. And in his role as Prosecutor General, he is one of the first, like Kenneth Blanco, to note the importance of international cooperation to fight against corruption. Hearing him speak last night at a private dinner, I know you'll find his insight incredibly captivating. Now, please join me both in welcoming Prosecutor General Rodrigo Janot, but also in applauding his tireless work every day in Brazil to stamp out corruption in that country. Senhor Janot, é prazer ter você aqui.
Good morning to everyone. And I'm going to speak in Portuguese to not run the risk of committing any mistakes. It's a great honor to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great honor to share this talk with my colleagues. I prepared a very short speech so that we can have a very frank and free discussion and a great question and answer period. I listened to Blanco speak, and I remembered that I was in Davos at the invitation of the World Forum, and I participated in some panels, and some of them spoke about the problems in Latin America, especially the question of corruption. And one of the professors that was there who did an analysis of this issue said something that really had an effect on me. 40 years ago, maybe 45 years ago, Latin America was known throughout the world for the number of its generals. Today, Latin America is known throughout the world for the number of its judges and prosecutors. This was the great change in the way of paradigms, and I hope this is irreversible. Today, Brazil is undergoing three crises: one of ethics, one of politics, and one of economics. To justify the presence of these is ipso loquito, as they say, to justify these crises, economic and political one. It's common to attribute these crises as a consequence of this huge investigation that's the biggest investigation, the biggest criminal investigation in Latin America. What I used to saying is that the economic crisis didn't occur as a result of the investigation, or it's not caused by this constitutional or illegal happenings in Brazil. The economic crisis arose from, or has its own causes. What we've discovered through these investigations is that certain sectors of the Brazilian economy worked in a specific way through market capturings and through barriers, so that certain sectors, certain companies could impede competition and could maintain themselves through bribery, through bribes, through what we call propinas, through a vicious cycle. And unconstitutionally, not in a non-Republican way, it would generate the cartels and great profits. These profits would generate ever more capturings of markets, ever more profits, and this virtuous cycle, this cycle would not stop. This didn't affect the economy. We want to see the economy developing in a free way with healthy competition so that we can reach economic efficiencies, technological efficiencies, greater wealth, and a positive result for that would give rise to a proper market economy. The political crisis.
Political crisis is not caused by the investigation either. We hear it every day that the Brazilian justice system is criminalizing politics. This is not true. What we do is to apply criminal law, respecting the broad opportunity for defense, and looking for the criminals despite the fact that they have political mandates. But it's not a political action, but it's applying the law, enforcing the law. So the law that exists is to be applied to everyone, regardless of their religions, their race, or their status. And this is what the justice system in Brazil has been doing. When we shed a light over corruptions, it's the best way to clean everything. We have an important role to play with the civil society that has been mobilizing and having required that these cases move forward. We have synergy with state agencies. Not only we could not get to where we got without that help. So we work together with the federal police, the revenue service, tax intelligence agency, and the role of the press. What is different today in Latin America? We have less dictatorship, more democracy, and a free press. A press that investigates, that go after, and that asks questions and exposes things. The role of academia, everything that is going in Brazil, will have to, in the future, conduct a technical study on this sociological time that Brazil is going through, and the role of the private sector. There is a lot of discussion with regard to this issue, and how first too much regulation of the private sector, and the regulation by itself did not yield results. So what we did next is go to the other side. The regulating agencies by themselves will not achieve the results we want. So now we have a mixed model: compliance of the companies, self-control, and also the agencies. Without all these efforts, we would not be able to do it and come here and continue with this investigation. It has to be included in the Brazilian context that is regional. The combating corruption is not a problem of only Brazil and Argentina and Venezuela. It's a regional problem because, as Blanco has mentioned, economic globalization causes criminal organizations to globalize too. So we'll see next that the legal cooperation has an impact on this investigation. Without international legal cooperation, it would be impossible to do what we have been doing. Today, it's impossible to hide from the Brazilian jurisdiction, regardless of its individuals or assets, because of our intense cooperation. We'll find assets and people regardless of borders. So these are the numbers of countries that are involved in cooperation. I'd like to talk a little bit about cooperation with the United States specifically. We've been cooperating with the United States for a long time. We also had a case, the Embraer case. We also have two-way cooperation. So one cooperation is to technical capacity building. A lot of people who are working on these cases were trained here and had updated courses here, and they made contact with the Department of Justice, with the prosecutors, and transferred investigation technologies and planning. And on the other side, the number of mutual assistance requests and how those requests are executed have been increasing. I would like to show you the numbers now, figures, if it is possible, the numbers associated with cooperation. See information flow. Well, we have 158 active requests, 105 passive requests, and cooperation has generated $2,000 million that were repatriated. There are 5 Brazilian defendants are arrested and expecting deportation. The agreement with Odebrecht, with the company, we learned a lot of lessons. The first time we had an agreement with 3 countries involving this issue: United States, Switzerland, and Brazil. And this intense cooperation allowed us to have the same language that facilitates this agreement. And to conclude my remarks, respecting my time limit, I'd like to call your attention to a few lessons that we learned from this investigation. It is essential for the agencies of the Office of Federal Prosecutors have autonomy. So if they don't have autonomy to work with professionalism and free, it's not possible to move forward with this type of investigation. Specialization is essential. If we're talking about money laundering, we need to have experts that are able to track the money, and it's not always easy to do that. We have to seek synergies, and Blanco said the same thing. And it's like music to my ears. It's a synergy between prosecutors. The use of information technology. Without it, without information technology, this investigation would not have moved forward. We have to use investigation techniques different ones, and we're going to use this exchange with the U.S. prosecutors and have combined criminal agreements with non-criminal agreements, international cooperation, and transparency. Transparency makes the investigation more legitimate. When you are prosecuting high-level officials, the criteria have to be made public because society needs to understand what's going on. It's not an investigation without a predetermined target. We investigate facts, and based on those facts, we will get to individuals. Transparency is a way of security for the investigation agencies. To conclude, and Blanco also said, corruption, it steals from education, from healthcare. It steals from all areas, from public safety. And most of all, Brazilian people is really tired of corruption. And most of all, corruption steals the hope and the future of a people. That's what we have to think about. Thank you very much.
I'm Andrea Murta. I'm the Deputy Director of the Latin America Center, and it's a special privilege for me to be here with you all today. It's a pride of a lifetime for me to be here with these two gentlemen and just witnessing and talking about the work that they've been doing. And I know that a lot of you share the same sentiment because this was the event that broke all the records for us in terms of registration and interest. And there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of people watching in Brazil, in the United States, from home. So it's a great privilege and honor for me to be here with you today. I'll jump straight into questions because the hardest thing today will be to stop discussing this.
And that's just us.
I know. And there's a lot more people that are going to come up to the stage and speak about their experiences in the car wash operation and anti-corruption cooperation that are very important. So, Mr. Blanco, let me start with you, because I wanted to hear your reactions to what Mr. Janot just said. And also, since we talked a lot about Odebrecht, which was one of the most emblematic cases of anti-corruption cooperation in the world, with fines of about 93 million, if I'm not mistaken, here in the US, and almost 2 billion potentially in Brazil. So, one, what was your reaction to Mr. Janot? And two, how did this cooperation, specifically for the car wash operation, came about between Brazil and the United States, and what's different about it, if anything?
If you don't mind, I'm going to stand because I'm a frustrated trial lawyer, and so I stand a lot, and I also want to grow. So that's one of the things I like to do. I think what Rodrigo said was very important, and really what was more important for me, and I think what should be important for all of you, and that is what he said about people's future. That is the bottom line here, and I think that's what everybody is thinking or should be thinking. And frankly, and I'll get to your question in a second. So I read through the list of all you people who were going to be here because, I'm a government lawyer, and I want to know who's going to be here. And this really falls on all of you, too. It's all of you. There are journalists here. There are legislators here. There are think tank people here. There are government agents here. All of you have to join this fight. That's the bottom line. We can do what we can do, and we're working closely together, and we will continue to work closely together. There is a bond now, I think, between our team here in the United States and the Brazilian team. And that bond is also bonded with other regional partners as well. And the world, the old saying, the world is watching. The world is watching. And they're watching how this relationship works. And this relationship worked because we've had other cases that we've done before together. And that's really how the Odebrecht case came together. We know, and it's true, it's a global world now. You just can't have one crime that affects one country anymore, not in the real world, not in a complex world that we deal with. Yeah, maybe, that might happen every once in a while, but when you're talking about global, sophisticated finance, money, and it's billions of dollars. We're not talking about chump change. We're talking about billions of dollars that moves. One day it's here, one day it's gone. And where it goes, you can be for sure that we need to work with those partners. And everybody realizes that. And the truth be told, I mean, let's just be honest about it. The truth be told is the real reason, or one of the real reasons, is not only to put these bad people in jail, but that's not their money. And that money was designated for a particular purpose. And people deserve to have that money back. And so it's not only important to punish them, because they need to be punished, and severely, but that money needs to be returned. And the goal here, and we're working on it with our partners in Brazil, and we're working on it with our partners in Colombia and in Mexico, where we're drafting a sharing agreement of assets. That's the important part, getting it back where it needs to be. And that communication back and forth, and understanding each other's judicial systems. I'm learning so much about the Brazilian system, which is wonderful. And hopefully they're learning about our system as well. You know, as I always say, we're not perfect, but I certainly like our system, because I know it. But I'm learning other systems as well. And once we begin to identify the strengths of each other's systems, and be able to use those systems, these people will have no place to hide. And that's my comment.
Mr. Jano, we say that car wash operation in Brazil really changed the way we conduct anti-corruption investigations, and it was really a groundbreaking case for us. How did this investigation also change how we conduct international cooperation in terms of anti-corruption?
Well, these acts of corruption, as Blanco said, they don't affect just one country. They affect various countries, a number of countries. Or countries get together in order to join forces in these investigations in every way possible. Or these investigations can't proceed. The change in paradigm is just that. The organs of prosecution in various countries, and the various countries have to have a closely linked dialogue. We have information that can be exchanged independently of formal requests for investigation and for obtaining proof. And this information is what orients investigations in the various countries. So we have this type of contact, this intensive kind of contact for information exchange. We can align investigation in terms of those facts that affect all of us in a uniform way, and recognizing how how transnational organized crime, how their crimes can only be investigated if there's a very close cooperation among the countries. If crime organizes and evolved, the prosecutorial organizations have to do the same. And that's how the paradigm's been changing in terms of legal cooperation on the international level.
Just upon what you've been talking about, this cooperation and the mechanisms that we use. So I could be wrong, because I'm not specialized in the judicial systems, but from what I understand, when you do international cooperation, the requests and the agreements have to go through central governments and central agencies.
Central authorities.
Central authorities. I don't think necessarily corruption has grown a lot, but it certainly seems from our side that we're seeing a lot more of it, because it's becoming more transparent and we're fighting it more openly. So we see an amazing number of cases coming about, and it's almost like Pandora boxes that never end with ramifications of corruption investigations. There is pressure from certain sectors to change the way that these agreements are conducted between countries, to make it more nimble, to make it faster, to make it easier for police forces and the judicial systems to cooperate. What's your opinion about those proposed changes, so that it doesn't have to go through those central authorities necessarily, and you can be more agency to agency?
Procurador?
Adopting this model of central authorities, well, it depends on the country. It's important that we have formal ways also so that we can have the proper controls in terms of the exchange of evidence and documents. We can't leave that aside. But the more agile, the more agility that these central authorities have, the better we can conduct these investigations. But beyond the transit of these of this evidence, which is exchanged through the central authorities, there's other information that should be exchanged in a more agile way. I mean, today everybody that deals through WhatsApp and Facebook. But there are things that have to be protected, have to be more secret. There are various models that we use. Now, what we can talk about is who should be the central authority. In Brazil, a lot of the treaties, the central authorities in the hands of the Ministry of Justice, the Prosecutor General would be the central authority. In some instances, it's the central authority in the treaty with Canada. It's the central authority in the convention here with New York. But we have to have a central authority because in terms of the exchange of evidence, it can't be done in a very open way in order to guarantee the rights of the defendant and of all the parties.
I agree. Look, each country is different, and each country bases their laws on their culture and their background and how they feel comfortable doing it. But what is clear is in order for us to enter this age of this global world, we're going to have to be more agile. The interesting thing about organized crime, whether they're public corruptors or not, is they don't respect borders. They don't. They don't have borders. We do. And we need to respect each other's sovereign laws, and that's important. But we also need to be able to be nimble in how we do it. And one of the ways we do that is by having these conversations that Rodrigo and I are having today, having these conversations with our counterparts, seeing if they will tweak their laws to make it more amenable to the way we do business, and we tweak our laws in order for them to do business. But it's true, you need a central authority, you need a formal process. There are some, and there's been talk out there from some countries about having certain laws where that formality may not be as formal and that it will be more nimble. And that may have to do with the laws being more similar or different kinds of laws that people are passing. But that's a global conversation, and that's one that we're willing to have with everybody to determine whether or not our law enforcement people can be more nimble in that way. But having these dialogues is important. And frankly, as we talked about earlier, it isn't that there's more public corruption now, it's that we're seeing it better. We've become more nimble. We've become more sophisticated. And now there's even more and more money involved than there ever was before. And as I always say, money attracts theft. It just happens that way. You give a pot of money, people are going to want it. And that's just the way it is, whether it's government or whether it's private business. So we're able to see it a little bit more and be able to track it a lot better.
I have a big problem because I was going down my list of questions and highlighting the ones that I really had to ask. And instead of highlighting a few, I added more. So it's very difficult. But I want to ask a question that everybody in Brazil asks, but I think it has an important lesson to everyone that's dealing with anti-corruption, which is political pressure. So in Brazil, we talk a lot about how the investigation can go on if we have political pressure in Congress or in certain, parts of the government. They're against the advances of investigations. And that's something that I suspect Mr. Janot has had to deal with. And I suspect, but now this is really a suspicion, that Mr. Blanco sometimes has to deal with in his work here in the United States, and just like every other country would. So to Mr. Janot, to the extent that you can tell us how you think that car wash operation and your work can proceed in the face of, sometimes harsh opposition in Congress and in government. And to Mr. Blanco, how do you deal with these political pressures here in the United States? So Mr. Janot, if you can start.
I think there are a number of factors that permit that the investigation proceed in the face of these pressures. First, these investigations involve a number of organs of control. This investigation doesn't belong only to the prosecutor's office. That involves very respected institutions within the context of the Brazilian state, the Treasury, COAF, the police departments. So the work that is shared and access to information on the part of these various organs prevents that or impedes any group, any interest from obstructing the investigation. The second point, what I talked about before, transparency. The investigation has to be transparent and open in order to protect the investigation. If you have an investigation that's open, you're every day checked by society. You're asked, why did you choose this as opposed to that route or option? And then we have the control of the fourth estate, as we call it in Brazil, which is the press. The press every day disseminates and checks how we proceed and the behavior of the investigations. On the other hand, the public prosecutor's office in Brazil has a very peculiar, has an idiosyncrasy. When there's something that's different from everything, we call it a jabuticaba, which is a kind of fruit. The public prosecutor's office in Brazil is independent. It's autonomous. It doesn't involve any other branch of government. It's not legislative, it's not the judiciary, not the executive. The members of the public prosecutor's office come to their positions through a civil service exam after a certain period or a term. If a prosecutor or a member of that department successfully goes through the exams, if he's an apt professional, he becomes permanent. He becomes permanent, and he cannot be removed. So, as a member of the public prosecutor, if I'm working in Brasilia, I cannot be removed from Brasilia, and I can't be sent to São Paulo, for example. I can only be removed from my position and sent to Rio, for example, if I agree to that, if I agree to be sent to another geographical location. And we can't also be sent to another case. We can't also be removed from a certain case unless we agree to it. Or if we're removed for a case for disciplinary purposes. So when you bring all of these factors together, that prevents these political pressures from generating any nefarious result over the case. So there are, of course, psychological pressures that we undergo. We have the Prosecutor General. He has a fixed mandate. He is chosen within the career. He's a career professional, but he's chosen by the President. He has to be approved by the Senate. I have a 2-year mandate. I'm finishing that, and I can be renewed. During this period of my mandate, I can't lose. I can't be removed unless I commit a crime. If I don't practice any crime, I continue until the very last day. I can't be removed. So this whole collection, all of these circumstances contribute to the protect the case. Talvez seja.
We have a tradition in this country of prosecutorial independence and prosecutorial discretion. So I can tell you I've been doing this for 28 years. I have never, in one instance, in any case that I've had, felt any political pressure at all. No one has ever told me what to do or how to do it, and we've done some pretty strong, very important cases. And as you know, in the criminal division, we also have the public integrity section. It has never once crossed my mind that a charge cannot be brought, ever, never. We follow the facts wherever the facts take us. I don't worry about it, make the decision as long as it's fair, as long as it follows the law, and we do the right thing. Bottom line. That's my answer to your question.
Still on the topic of political pressure. Now I'm going to put you in a hot spot, Mr. General, because there's a lot of questions in Brazil about the political results as well of Lava Jato. For better or worse, we are facing a period of instability. We now have a president, after the impeachment of another president, who's facing indictments, who's facing the possibility of being ousted as well. And I'm not going to predict what's going to happen, but I want to ask you a question that we get asked a lot, which is, do you consider the political consequences of investigations, or is that a totally separate concern?
If I consider any political consequences of a technical act, I can't work. I can't do my work. But if I render flexible any act, if I render it flexible of a criminal investigation, this consideration would have to be extended to a greater or lesser degree and in a discretionary degree to other people. So what I do is to apply the law. I compare the facts to what is applied in the law. Is it a crime or is it not a crime? Do the facts correspond to the crime, or is it or not a crime? I go after evidence in those terms. I have to identify the author of that crime, the protagonist behind that crime, if there is a crime. So I identify the author of that act if there is a crime that I identify. That's it. It's a technical evaluation, and it doesn't allow me to consider any political dimension in terms of the investigation or investigating or no.
Because a person has political power, economic power. I like to remind you that Brazil is a republic, and in a republic, everybody is the same under the law. So how can I give different treatment, saying that those who do not economic or political power, the law will, those who do not have power will be, will have the law against them. So this consideration of whether it goes against technical investigation effort, so I don't take into account any political consequences because this is a legal and technical fact. Mr. Blanco.
Look, at the bottom line is that you can't have different systems for different people. It doesn't work that way. And the only way our systems work in a republic, as Rodrigo said earlier, is if it gets support and confidence by its people. And if it doesn't have support and confidence from the people, you don't have a system at the end of the day. So you can't treat people differently. You have to be smart. You have to make sure that what you're doing is the right thing. It has to be fair. You can't take bad evidence. You can't take bad witnesses. You have to be smart. You have to ask questions. And you have to make sure that the person who you've accused did something wrong. And just as important, you have to make damn sure that the people who are innocent are found innocent, that you make sure that they're innocent. That's why when people say, oh, I can't believe you're investigating. Well, yeah, sometimes we're investigating to make sure that they are innocent, to clear their names sometimes. But you have to make sure that you have the right people doing the right thing for the right reasons. And having multiple systems that is influenced in any way, whether by money or politics, doesn't work and shouldn't happen.
I'm about to get your questions to the audience. I have just a couple more to wrap it up. One is, do you see a danger of us, as in Brazil, going back to the way we used to be after car wash, if it ever wraps up? Or do you think that we have changed the system permanently?
I don't know if the system is completely changed, but the ways and the steps taken are irreversible. I don't believe that Brazil will accept, the Brazilian society will accept to go back to a system before, like it was before this investigation. That's what I believe. I was making a joke. If I don't have dual citizenship, the only citizenship that I have is Brazil, and I don't intend to move from Brazil. What I do is to invest in my country, and Brazilian society today is watching, and those who are Brazilian is here to remember the movements, popular movements from 2013. Brazilians went to the street in 2013. We had, not only because of the investigation, but a previous investigation before that in Congress to change the Constitution to remove powers from the Office of Prosecutors, that it would be in terms of investigations. So this, the results were going to be, it was predefined because we already knew what congressmen were going to vote for what and how many votes we had. So, but people, they did not think that the people would rise up. So in 2013, people went to the streets to tell no to a PAC 37. So I don't think we're going to go back. We have moved forward. We still have too much, a long way to go. But at what we are doing right now, I don't believe we can go back to the past. And people with corruption, people are tired of not having health and education and a future. So I
proposed law that would limit the power of the Ministry of Public to investigate crimes. It was the first time I heard people in my family and my mother going into the streets and actually knowing exactly what they were against and who was voting for what. And my mother was calling me on the phone and saying, because PAC 37, that can't go forward. And I was incredibly surprised because that was really a turning point in Brazil. I think it changed the way that people engaged with politics even. Mr. Jano, we're almost at the end of your second term, like you mentioned. Your last day will be September 15th, I believe. So before we finished, I just wanted to ask you, looking back to the past 4 years, your biggest pride, your biggest surprise, and your biggest regret. I know it's a tough question.
Decepção.
My greatest sense of pride from all was to see the Office of Federal Prosecutors being recognized internationally and in Brazil, and it's recognized in Latin America and everywhere in the world. And this is my greatest reason to be proud. And my greatest regret, there are a few. One that is how fast is that the investigation did not move as fast as I'd like to see results faster. And the greatest regret, I wouldn't be able to say it today because we are in the midst of all this case, and we cannot assess it at this time when we are involved in this investigation. I need some more time to move away and wait for time to pass and then go back and look with clear mind. So history will have to say, and more, and I would say I'll be able to identify the problems that I face. Maybe 5 years from now, I'll be able to talk about that, and maybe I'll be back to come back and tell you my regrets. The process does not allow me to evaluate that. So maybe I'll be able to do that in 5 years.
So I'll go first here. We have microphones coming to you, so please identify yourself. And I know that you're going to want to make a comment, but try to make just a question because we don't have a lot of time, okay? Please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Professor Justino de Oliveira, University of São Paulo, School of Law, Brazil. To Mr. Blanco, since we are talking about global cooperation against corruption, is it feasible that in the near future companies can adopt a single global anti-corruption policy? Is this even considered a goal among authorities involved in anti-corruption global cooperation? And to Mr. Janot, mainly because of its constitutional independence and autonomy, and also because of the ambiguous attitude from both of executive and legislative branches in Brazil towards corruption, Federal Prosecution Office has become the most important anti-corruption autonomous agency in Brazil. In your opinion, and considering the ongoing cooperation with the United States, what can we expect as the next steps of your institution after you leave the Prosecutor General's office? Thank you.
So, Mr. Blanco, let's start with you.
So, as you know, I mean, there are agreements that set global standards. There are rules of thumbs and principles that we all like to follow. And I don't think that's unusual. And I think that's, it's out there, and we have a number of them, whether they're UN treaties or treaties that we've entered in with other people. I think it's important. But I do think that it's also important that we respect each other's sovereignties. And I think it's also important that we respect each other's cultures. So let's face it, folks, corruption, it's logical. This isn't a hard game here. It's either wrong or it's right. I mean, it's public corruption. So I don't think it takes a genius to realize what that is. And I think that we all agree, at least generally speaking, logically what it might be. There might be some nuances in which we disagree, but I think it's really important that all countries that maybe even don't get along politically need to get along in this area. We have great working relationships with our law enforcement partners around the world, and I think that's what's going to be important. So to answer your question, to come up with principles, and there are principles out there, of what public corruption is and how we attack it and what we do with it. But one thing, and I'll give a plug to something that I think is really important, and we've talked about it here. It isn't enough to prosecute them. It isn't enough to put them into jail. You have to take the genesis of their crime. That is the money that they steal, the assets that they purchase, the places they put these assets in, the third parties that are using them, and take those assets as well. If you don't do that, you're not stamping out public corruption, and you're not doing what we can do in the future. And if there is a get out for something like that, I think our principles that we guide ourselves by international need to absolutely include that in a very strong way.
Your turn, Mr. Chen.
Well, I don't see room for any change with regard to how the Office of Prosecutors are gonna work in the future. We are all career professionals. We are trained and to be prosecutors. So regardless of how much you disagree about an issue, the way we think is the same. I can disagree in terms of methodology, but the goals are the same. So I'm believing that the institution will continue. It doesn't exist for itself, but it exists for the work it carries out and the cooperation it has with its partners. So federal prosecutor cannot say, now this investigation is closed because I don't want to continue with it anymore. It's not possible to do that. There are several ways and methodologies. Methods can change. Yeah, it's normal. It can change the team. I work with some people that are close to me and that I trust and that I can delegate a mission and be certain that the person will carry it out. It has to do with trust and knowledge, but I don't see how we can go back from that.
whose name I know, but I'll let him introduce himself.
Thanks. Welby Lehman from Walmart. You've spoken very convincingly of the importance of cooperation across governments internationally. What are the best practices for collaborating with the private sector, with good actors in the private sector, including internationally? There's a lot of evidence that companies with high compliance standards, often foreign investment communities, can really play a positive role in transmitting good standards throughout their supply chains. How do prosecutors, what are the best practices for prosecutors using that function effectively?
Bom, eu dizer que
I'd like to say that the best thing to deal with a crime is not to crack down on the crime, but to prevent it. Because when the crime is committed, there is damage, and the damage is not going to be rolled back. So we have to work a lot in preventing it. So how the companies will play a role? They understand that only the law enforcement agencies will not be able to prevent it. So at this point, we have compliance. So a company who has a compliance officer who is concerned with the integrity of the company, investigating internally something that could become a crime carried out by someone linked to this company, helps a lot. When I investigate an act carried out by a company, I don't know how the company works. I don't know the autonomy to make decisions and the circumstances of how the person, what is the position of the person in the company. So I have to learn about that. So if the company tells me that's how it works here, that's our structure, the relationship that we have between employees and employer, and this leads to us to believe that he didn't act, it has to be investigated. And
I compare that to plea bargain. So when I investigate in a criminal organization, I have to understand that organization. Otherwise, I can't investigate it. I'm not calling that a criminal organization, but I don't know. I don't understand it. And it has access to information that we don't. So we have to understand compliance in terms of the control, the organ of control. It's a partnership that only works out, that can only work out. The company wants to continue to act in the market and to grow, and the organs of control want to go after crime and want to make sure that the market is healthy.
The same pain that I'm going through, because I have about 10 more questions that I won't be able to ask, and we are beyond the time that we had reserved for this panel. So I'm going to ask you to join me in thanking both these gentlemen for coming here today and asking our questions.